I'm going to cover several aspects regarding constructivism. What meaning? What is constructivism? Who were the people who propounded constructivism? What is the difference between traditional and constructivist classrooms? What are the characteristics of constructivism? Types of constructivism, assumptions of constructivism, design principles, process of learning, schema, Piaget and concept maps, cooperative learning, metacognitive learning, brain-based learning, and authentic assessment. Whatever is there in the last rectangle are actual application aspects, and the first two are more or less theoretical aspects. So first we will talk about theoretical aspects and try and learn what is constructivism, and in the last rectangle we will look at its practical applications. Next, please. Yeah, what is constructivism? Let us see. Constructivism refers to the idea that we do not impart any knowledge to the students, to the learners. In fact, learners construct knowledge for themselves. They observe, they collect data, they try trial and error method, learning by insight. They discuss with others, they learn from their peers, they learn from book sources, and then they construct knowledge for themselves. So that is what is constructivism. Each learner individually and socially constructs meaning as he or she learns. Why do we say individually and socially? Some projects are individually done. Sometimes we give students group work. So when we give group work, it becomes socially social construction. So they learn both ways. A learning theory that equates learning with creating meaning from experience. So you learn from experience. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Yeah, because in the chat box, someone has.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So, actually, constructivism is a learning theory, and in that theory, students get experiences, and from there they create meaning and learn. So, learning is equal to creating meaning, creating knowledge from experience. Next, please. Okay. This continues with what is the meaning. There are some 5-6 points regarding this. So let us look at them. Constructivism argues that human beings generate knowledge. They create their own knowledge and meaning when they interact with their peers, their teachers, and they take experiences. Constructivism theory, according to them, learning is a process in which individuals construct meaning based on prior knowledge and experience. And there are several disciplines which are influenced by constructivism that include psychology, sociology, education, and the history of science. The responsibility of learning in constructivism lies with the student, with the learner, and not with the teacher. It is not a specific pedagogy. Constructivism does not mean there is a specific pedagogy. There are several pedagogies within constructivism. It's an umbrella term. In both Piaget and Vygotsky's models, teachers do not provide knowledge, but they facilitate learning. So emphasis is on teacher's role is not that of a knowledge provider. He or she facilitates learning. The responsibility of learning lies with the learner. Individuals get experiences with their peers and their surroundings. They experience things, and based on their prior knowledge and experience, they learn ideas. And it's not a specific pedagogy. There are several pedagogies within that, within constructivism. So that's it. Next, please. Next is who are the chief proponents of constructivism. We have taken 4 major proponents in the next slide. So please, next slide, please. First, Lev Vygotsky, a Russian psychologist, whose theory said that the basic basis of constructivism, he laid down the basis of constructivism. He believed that learners develop strong thinking skills through interaction with their culture and their surroundings. So when we interact with our culture, when we interact with our surroundings, we develop strong thinking skills, and through that we create new knowledge. The second was Jerome Bruner, has made significant contributions to human cognitive psychology and cognitive learning theory in educational psychology, as well as to history and to the general philosophy of education. So Bruner was also another contributor or chief proponent of constructivism. Then we have Piaget. We have all learned about Piaget and his stages of development and sensory motor, pre-sensory motor. We know all that. He was a developmental psychologist as well as a philosopher, and he is known for his epistemological studies with children. He believed that children learn through experience. They adapt to situations based on what they have previously learned from other situations. And the fourth one is John Dewey. Of course, in B.Ed we have learned a lot about John Dewey, his experiential learning, his pragmatism. So John Dewey also felt that through real life experiences to construct knowledge, we construct knowledge which is consistent with constructivist. So these are the main proponents. There are several others, but these are the main ones who advocated constructivism. Next, please. If you have questions, you can write in the chat box. I kept it open, so as and when you write, I can give answers. Of course, you can also ask at the end, but while we are talking about constructivism, if something comes to your mind, you can surely write there. And you can also open your mic and ask me directly, no issues. There is no other way in which we can make it interactive more than this, since it is online. Traditional and constructivist classrooms, now we will compare them in the next slide. There are several points, about 7-8 points are there, which compare traditional classrooms with constructivist classroom. First is the scope. Traditional classroom begins with parts of the whole, whereas constructivist classroom begins with the whole, and then we go to the parts. So here part to whole, and here whole to part. A traditional classroom emphasizes basic skills of arithmetic, reading, and writing, whereas here big concepts are emphasized in constructivist classrooms. Curriculum. In traditional classroom, we have a fixed curriculum, we have a fixed timetable, we go to the classroom, we use Harvardian steps or a few other methods, finish our curriculum, and our work is done. Whereas in constructivist classroom, students students ask questions, and their interests are very important. We pursue students' interest. We go as per their interest. Learning. It is traditional classroom is based on repetition. Teacher comes to the class, teaches a concept, gives some exercise, and that's it. Whereas in a constructivist classroom, it is very interactive. There is an interaction between student and teachers and among small groups of students also, and it builds on previous knowledge. Materials, primarily textbooks and workbooks. Whereas in constructivist classroom, primary sources are used and manipulative materials are used. A lot of worksheets are given, or a lot of projects are given. So it's quite manipulative. Then we go to the next one. Teacher. Teacher is the knowledge provider and main source of information in traditional classrooms. Students receive the knowledge, teacher imparts knowledge, mostly through lecture method. Whereas in constructivist classroom, teachers guide students to knowledge, students construct their own knowledge. This I have been saying in the first slide itself, and most of you might be knowing that too. Next, please. Okay. Then teacher's role in traditional classroom is directive and authoritative. There was a film by Rishi Kapoor, I forgot the name, but he was a school teacher in that film. That was in the latter half of his life. and students are giving examination, and he walks very authoritatively during that examination by keeping his hands behind his back and walk with his chest expanded, hands behind his back, and he walks in the class, which shows an authoritative style, which generally happens in traditional classrooms. Whereas in constructivist classrooms, there is an interaction, as I said earlier. The teacher is a mediator. He provides worksheet, he prepares worksheets, he prepares handouts for students, he prepares exercises for students. He guides them how to conduct a project. So he's a mediator. And there is a negotiation. There is something called a teaching contract or learning contract, where the teachers and students together decide, आज इतना portion खत्म करना है. So there is a negotiation, there is a contract. It is not our appointment contract. This is the contract between students and teachers for that particular classroom, where they come together and decide, आज इतना portion cover करना है. That is called rooted in negotiation. Other word is teaching learning contract. Assessment. We prepare traditional test, exam question papers, and we emphasize correct answers. Whereas in constructivist classrooms, students perform some work, they write, they do exercises, they do projects, they write journals, there are several ways. They observe what is going on, they express their points of view. Tests are, of course, understanding that process is more important than the final product. So that is what is constructivist knowledge. Knowledge here is inert. In traditional classroom, there is one single reality. So therefore, we emphasize correct answer, and we feel that intelligence is fixed. In constructivist classroom, knowledge is dynamic, it keeps on changing. In traditional classroom, knowledge is fixed, it does not change. One reality, permanent knowledge. Whereas in constructivist classroom, knowledge keeps on changing, it is dynamic, and it is based on experiences. And there are multiple realities. Students classrooms work mainly individually, whereas in constructivist classrooms, students work in groups. So these are the major differences between traditional and constructivist classrooms. Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Next, please.
Can you please hide?
एक रिक्वेस्ट आहे पार्टिसिपंट कडनं, खाली जे आहे ना स्टॉप शेअरिंग, त्याच्या बाजूला हाईड म्हणून एक आहे, त्याच्यावर क्लिक केलं तर बरं होईल, कारण त्यांना सगळं खाली लिहिलेलं वाचता येत नाही.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we will look at characteristics of constructivism. Next, please. Okay. Constructivism is student-centered. It is not based on curriculum. So we do have a curriculum, but there is a learning contract between students and teachers. So it may go a little beyond curriculum. Focus of teaching is on the development of a suitable environment for constructing knowledge rather than transfer. So teacher's job is to create a non-threatening environment of the students, for the students, a motivating environment of the students, so that there is no transfer of knowledge from teacher to the students. Someone's mic is on. Will you please close it, switch it off? Hello, someone's mic is on. Please switch it off. You are requested. Constructivism focuses on knowledge production, reproduction, because we teach in class, students mug it up and write the same thing in the examination. I remember when I was doing my B.Ed, in one particular subject, I was young, very young, around 22, 23 at that time. little immature also. So I got a little less marking. We had to write essays those days. And in one of the essays, I got very less marks. I was furious. I came home and told my mother that tomorrow I will complain to the principal. My mother said, "You should not complain to the principal. Instead, go and ask the teacher where you have gone wrong." Next day, I went to the teacher and asked her, "Where did I go wrong? Why did I get less marks? How should I improve myself?" To my horror, the teacher told me, "Which books did you read?" I gave her two, three names. She said, "Notes are sufficient." The response was, "My notes are sufficient," which means I have given you knowledge, so you to reproduce it in the exam if you want to have good knowledge, if you want to have good marks. So entire emphasis was on knowledge reproduction, whereas today the focus and emphasis is on knowledge construction. The belief that one constructs knowledge from one's past experiences, and everyone's view of the external world differs. As I said, constructivism says there are multiple realities. So our views on the external world differs from others because we have unique set of experiences. All of us have different experiences, different ideas, and different interests. And these experiences, ideas, and interests decide the learning process in constructivism. So this is very clear case of multiple realities. Next. Learning new things depend on how they are interpreted or understood in that context. Learning takes place more with the social interaction. I'll give you one nice example here. Uh, when I was teaching in a school in the initial part of my career, I am a science teacher. And in biology experiments, there were some specimens of frog, and I taught students, using those specimens, the life cycle of a frog. One day, there was we in Gujarat also may be having, other states may also be having it, but Maharashtra has science exhibitions every year in the month of December. So for science exhibitions, they sometimes invite people to judge whose project is better. So for such project, I was invited, and I realized that I started talking to students and later to the teacher, and I asked, "You don't have biology specific like frog etc. in your school?" So the teacher told me, and the students jumped with joy. The students, it was a municipal school, and students were mainly from the lower socio-economic area. And in monsoon, a lot of water accumulates in and around slums. So students put their hand in the water, dirty water, bring out frogs in different stages of their life cycle, bring it to the school, a live frog and a live tadpole themselves. So that is social interaction because this is done in a group. So they require biological specimens, they do it with live specimens. So this is what is the difference between one school and the other, and how social interaction takes place for learning. As I said, multiple realities or multiple perspectives, multiple representations of concepts is encouraged. So you have to give your own opinion in constructivism. You don't have to do ratta marna, possible nahi hai. Activities, opportunities, tools, and environments are provided to the students to encourage metacognition, self-analysis, self-regulation, self-reflection, and self-awareness. There are several pedagogies within constructivism. I had said this earlier. One such is metacognition, where you try to understand how you learn. Learning how to learn. That is metacognition. Understanding how to understand. And that requires analyzing yourself, self-regulation. You have to have control over yourself, your thinking. You need to think that intelligence can be developed. It is not fixed. You reflect on yourself. How did I learn? What did I learn? What did I learn well? What I did not learn well? Where did I go wrong? How do I need to change my method of studying? So that's self-reflection and self-awareness. I'm good at something. I'm very good at something. I'm not very good at something else. So these things you need to, that is called self-awareness. Your strengths and your weaknesses. So that is very important, and all these are included within metacognition. Next is problem solving, higher order thinking. Please wait. Problem solving, higher order thinking skills, and deep understanding are also emphasized in uh, constructivism. Next slide, please. We will now look at types of constructivism. Next, please. There are three major types of constructivism. The first is cognitive constructivism. It states knowledge can be actively constructed by learners based on their existing cognitive structures. Then that implies that your learning depends on which stage of cognitive development. If your cognitive development is high, then learning is high. You can learn higher order thinking skills. Here, students assimilate knowledge with the existing knowledge. That is known as cognitive constructivism. Next, social constructivism. Here, learning is a collaborative process developed from individuals' interactions, culture, and society. You learn.
Ma'am, 1 minute. It is.
You learn uh, in two ways. Your cultural development takes place at the social level between people, which is known as interpsychological, and you also learn at the individual level inside your brain, inside yourself, which is intrapsychological. And the third one is known as radical constructivism, which states that all knowledge is constructed rather than perceived through senses. You do not perceive anything through senses. You do not read and understand anything. You do not hear anything and learn. So you don't use your indriya, your eyes or your ears to learn something, but you construct knowledge. You develop your own knowledge. Uh, I would give one example here. In research, we use two methodologies, quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. So this one speaks more about the qualitative approach. You observe, you interview, you measure something, you try out things yourself and learn. Also, the knowledge that individuals create tells us nothing about reality and only helps us to function in your environment. Thus, you don't discover knowledge, you invent knowledge. Next, please. We now look at assumptions of constructivism. Next, please. Knowledge is constructed as people are saying sound is not clear. I think my internet is quite strong. Yeah, I checked my internet, it is quite strong. Knowledge is constructed as learners make sense of their experiences. So it may not, the knowledge that you have created may not match reality because shall I wait for some time? If you are not able to hear, Shall I wait for some time? Some are saying it's clear, some are saying it's not clear. Because your knowledge construction here depends on your own experiences and multiple realities, what you have constructed may not match reality. Learners actively seek meaning in the environment. In the learning process, students create and test theories until a satisfactory explanation is known, and knowledge depends on the context. Therefore, I'm saying there are multiple realities. There is not no one single answer, no one single reality. And social interactions are vital to learning. These are some of the assumptions of constructivism. Next, please. We will look at some design principles. Okay, next, please. Jonathan has given these design principles about 30 years back. There are about 8 principles. The first principle is create real-world environments that employ the context in which learning is relevant. So make learning as relevant to one's social context, cultural context and environment, and it should look as if they are learning in the real world. Second, focus on realistic approaches to solving real world problems. When you give projects to the students, you give them problems which are being faced by the real world. The instructor is see, for example, if you look at the West, they have a lot of a major problem with lesbians, whereas in India it's not so much. So if you give that topic, it doesn't become very much relevant to one's life as it is in Western world. The third one, the instructor is a coach and analyzer of the strategies used to solve these real world problems. He doesn't solve the problems for students, but he helps the student to solve the problems. Fourth, the teacher should emphasize conceptual interrelationship between concepts, provide them multiple representations or perspectives on the content. So teacher should help them to understand that for one thing there might be multiple perspectives. Can anyone give me an example about multiple representations or multiple perspective of one particular topic? You can write in the chat box or you can open your mic and answer.
May I, ma'am?
I've asked a question.
Madam?
Yes.
The food has multiple perspective. For example, it has nutritional value. It is connected with culture also. It is connected with festivals also. So in that way, we can analyze or we can relate the food with many perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah. Some say rice is not good. Some eat rice, only rice. If you go to southern parts or eastern parts of India, only rice is the prominent food. Whereas if you go to northern part, some of the northern states, wheat is the prominent. So there are different perspectives on the content. Good example. Fifth one, evaluation should serve as a self-analysis tool. Evaluation should help the student to analyze oneself. Have I understood? How well have I understood? Where have I gone wrong? How do I need to improve? So evaluation should aim at that. Sixth, instructional goals and objectives should be negotiated and not imposed. As I said, there should be a contact between the students and the teachers every day, for every period, every lecture, which is negotiated. ठीक है, आज इतना करना है, आज ये नहीं करना है, आज ये करना है. So teacher cannot impose, आज इतना खत्म करना ही है, कुछ भी हो जाए. 7th, provide tools and environments that help learners interpret the multiple perspectives of the world. So the teacher should help students and provide tools, instruments, and environments that help the students understand and interpret multiple perspectives of the world. And last, learning should be internally controlled and mediated by the learner. You cannot impose. You can take a horse to water, you cannot make it drink water. And that applies here very well. Student has to feel internal need. I used the word earlier, self-regulation, self-motivation, intrinsic motivation, self-regulation. That is very important under constructivism. So this may not be extremely useful in lower classes, might be useful in upper classes, because lower class children do not have inner urge to learn something, not to that extent that older students have. Next, please. Process of learning. Next, please. Yeah. This is taken by K.A. Korb of University of Jos. What is the process of learning under constructivism? There is a concept called schema. It typically a misconception. Then you test schema. Then you have expected results. And you have, if it is good expected results, if you achieve the expected results, you assimilate your new knowledge with your old knowledge. But if you do not get expected results, you develop new schema, accommodate, adapt, and test that. So you have a misconception or a conception. You test that. If you get expected results, you assimilate, you integrate your new knowledge with the old knowledge. If you do not get expected result, you develop new schema, which is called accommodation or adaptation, and then test it again. So this is the process of learning in constructivism. Next, please. Schema. In the earlier slide, I spoke about schema. So now for some more 4 or 5 slides, we will only look at schema. What is schema? It is a structure for representing concepts in memory. We have our memory. We have concepts in the memory. And those concepts may be interrelated with each other. And there is a structure of those concepts. So that is called a schema. There is another term called schema theory. What is it? It is a theory of how knowledge is represented and how the representation of knowledge guides the application of knowledge. How knowledge is structured in your brain and how we apply that in life. Incoming information from the environment is organized around previously developed schema. I'll give you one small example that I actually seen in a child. A child had a schema in the brain. The child's father was working as an engineer in a factory. And every day he would go to the factory and he will say, I'm going to the plant. So the child grew up with a concept that plant is a place where father goes to work. That was his schema, representation of knowledge in his memory. The child then went to school. And the teacher started talking about flowers and plants. And the teacher asked the question, what is a plant? So this child raised his hand and said, plant is a place where father goes to work. So he applied whatever was there in his mind to the actual situation. And the answer here, this is what I mean by multiple reality. From the child's perspective, the answer was not wrong. It was correct because he had a structure of that particular concept in his mind, and he applied it accordingly. The teacher's world was different. For teacher, plant is something else that we have in botany. So his teacher's answer was different. But this is an example of a schema. This kind of thing also came up. One researcher was conducting research. This is an example of the Western world. And researcher was researching on second or third standard child, I think second standard children. And he gave them some question, and below which some multiple choices were given. And there were the question was, which of the following are associated with the word fly? Udna, fly. Here, the options were dog, bird, elephant, and a fourth one was also there, donkey. Most of the children, they said the word bird is associated with the word fly. From our elders' perspective, it is correct. But there were about 20% of the children said the correct answer here is elephant. So researcher wanted to understand how we make meanings. Therefore, he conducted this research. So he isolated those children who had given answer, elephant is associated with the word fly. And he called them aside and asked them, why did you say that elephant is flying? So they said, there is a famous Walt Disney character, Dumbo the Flying Elephant. For children, that Walt Disney character was more realistic to their lives, to their brain, to their age. So for them, Dumbo the Flying Elephant was a character. Therefore, the correct word for flying was elephant and not a bird. So this is, I'm giving example about schema and how concepts are structured and represented in your brain and how you apply. It depends on your cognitive development. For small children, cognitive development is less. They learn from what is there around them. What they watch cartoon characters on TV, that is more realistic for them. And that is how they learn. As they grow older, concepts in the brain changes, and therefore the knowledge also changes, and the application also of knowledge also changes. Next, please. Okay. What are schemas like? Schemas provide, they are like drama. Schemas provide the script where the variables or the characters, setting and action are unique to each performance. As I gave the example in earlier this thing, for some, word fly was associated with the word bird, but for others it was with elephant. So it depends on the character, setting and action, and each one has a unique performance there. Schemas are like theories because we interpret phenomena and make predictions about unobserved events. And schemas are also like procedures and algorithms where we evaluate new information to determine the fit to the schema and then direct future behavior. For the last one, could you give an example? Can anyone give an example for the last one?
Ma'am, if I know riding the cycle, then I can easily learn any two-wheeler like Activa or anything. That I think the procedure we can consider.
Yeah, you have learned to ride a bicycle.
Yeah.
then you learn to ride a scooter or a
Yeah.
motor. Once you start learning motorbike, you realize balancing parts, etc., are similar to the riding of a cycle. So this new learning of riding a motorbike is similar and it fits into your schema. So it directs your future behavior, and then you start riding both. And sooner you realize that if I can drive a cycle, if I can drive a motorbike, I can also drive a car. So that is your future behavior. Very good example. Thank you. Who was that? Who answered that?
Ma'am, Sheetal Helaya.
Okay, I've heard it. Next, please. What are the properties of schema? Schemas are developed by prior knowledge and experience. Prior knowledge was riding a cycle. It was also the experience of riding a cycle. And that decided that you can balance yourself on a cycle. So you will also be able to balance a motorbike. So that is how your schema was developed. So your schema says, I can balance a two-wheeler, be it a cycle, be it a motorbike, or a scooter or Activa, jo bhi hai. Mumbai mein we don't use two-wheelers much, so I do not have much knowledge about them. But since you are doing it, if my PPT is not visible, I can't help it. Dr. Deshmukh has to do it. Dr. Deshmukh, the PPT is not visible to Prakriti James.
Ma'am, it is visible to other people also. It's 2-3 in my room only.
Now I cannot see it.
Miss, I have set down the slideshow.
Oh. Please do it again.
Visible.
So whoever is not able to see the PPT, they can pin up the my Dhananjay Deshmukh, that particular individual. So that will be.
Yeah, thank you. Then you actively build schemas and revise them in the light of new information. You learn to drive a two-wheeler. Now you try to drive a four-wheeler. So you've got a new schema, and then therefore you revise your old schema and say, I can easily drive both two-wheelers as well as four-wheelers. So you have revised your old schema in the light of new information. Third one, information from the environment is processed and transformed depending on prior schema. Your earlier concepts or earlier schema will decide how you process your environment, information in the environment, and how you transform it. Schemas help people understand, interpret, and remember incoming information. I'll give you one example for the third one. Information from the environment is processed and transformed depending on prior schemas. I'll give you one example for this. I had a student, and from the pre-primary onwards, she had studied in Marathi medium. In Maharashtra, our state language is Marathi. Because she also felt that she was a little diffident in speaking in English. So when she came to me for her M.Ed dissertation, she said, I want to take up a topic where I want to compare Marathi medium students with English medium students on their self-confidence. I said, why are you taking Marathi and English? So she said, my self-confidence is low because I studied throughout in Marathi medium. So I said, see, for that matter, I myself studied till 10th in Gujarati, that is being my mother tongue. I studied in Gujarati medium. But later on, once I went to my junior college and senior college and further education, I can very well read, write, and speak in English, give a session in English, teach in the class in English, write books in English. So I don't think my confidence is low, and I also don't think my confidence is related to my medium of instruction in school. But this girl was adamant. She was not willing to listen to me, and she said, no, My self-confidence is low because I studied in my mother tongue in school. So I want to take and compare. I said, in that case, don't take only Marathi. Take some other media of instruction also. Mumbai is a metropolitan city. We have schools with all different media of instruction, right from southern languages, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and northern languages, Punjabi, Sindhi, Gujarati, Bengali. We have all types of schools. So I said, you take Urdu. I told her that you take several different media where Indian language is the mother tongue, and versus that you compare English medium. And at the end, she realized, so her schema, original schema was that she is not confident, she is diffident because she studied in Marathi medium. That was information from her environment, which she processed and told me. After she completed her research, a clear-cut finding was visible. It said there is no significant difference in self-confidence of students who have studied in Indian languages or mother tongue versus English medium. So then she transformed her old schema because she processed the information, collected data, and realized that her original schema had to be modified. So this is an example of information from the environment is processed and transformed depending on prior schema. Am I clear?
Yeah, clear and audible.
No, I'm not talking about being audible. Clear in explanation. Yeah. Schemas help people understand, interpret, and remember incoming information. Schemas facilitate memory because it is easier to remember schema than details. And the last property of schema is culture influences schemas. Memory for knowledge or an event is determined by the cultural context in which it takes place. So therefore, we say culture influences schema. Could you give an example of this? That culture influences schema. I want an example for this.
Ma'am, if somebody is not the family belongs to that vegetarian, so they might have the schema that non-veg is not good.
Yeah, yes, correct. Yeah. Next, please. Functions of schema. Schemas organize knowledge in our brain, cognition. They help us to recall, assist recall. Yes, I remember. They guide our behavior. They enable predictions. How do we make predictions? We are teachers. In my class, I observe that there are some students who are high achievers. At the same time, I also observe that their IQ level is high. There are some students who are average achievers. IQ also is on an average. And some students who are poor achievers and IQ is also low. So what conclusion do I make? My conclusion is there is a significant relationship between IQ and academic performance of students, academic achievement of students. Now, next year, a new student enters the class, and when I start talking about talking to him, I also know his previous year's performance, and I realize that he has high IQ. So what prediction will I make about his achievement? Because he has high IQ, his achievement is also likely to be high. This is the kind of prediction I make. Another example, I am a school or a college principal, and I had a lot of experience of teaching, and after 20 years of teaching, I became the principal. And that 20 years of teaching taught me that teachers' commitment to the profession is more important than his or her marks in B.Ed and M.Ed. My 20 years of teaching experience has shown that more than performance in B.Ed and M.Ed, the commitment that a teacher has is more important to make him effective. So now that I have become a principal, I want to appoint teachers. There is a selection committee meeting. Interviews are held for recruiting new teachers. So I will make a prediction. This particular teacher's commitment, when I interact with the teacher in the interview, I ask questions pertaining to her commitment and I realize her commitment is low. So I make a prediction, her effectiveness as a teacher will be low. Next candidate comes and when I start asking questions, indirect questions about commitment, I realize this teacher's commitment is high. So he or she is likely to be effective, very effective as a teacher. So this is how schemas help us in making predictions. And last, they also help us to understand, to make sense of current experiences. Would you give an example for the last one?
Hello, madam.
Hello.
Madam, make sense of current experiences. I am Kalpataru Mondal from West Bengal. When we go to Howrah station, there are many hawkers, small boys from Bengal. But when they contact with the passengers, train passengers, they are talking with Bengali, they are talking with Gujarati, they are talking with English language, Marathi, every language. They are not learning formally. I hope this one be the example of make sense their current experience with contacting the passengers of these trains. They can talk to multilingual functions.
Yes, right, correct. Other example of making sense of current experiences, you are just standing outside the principal's office and you have not yet entered it, but you realize another teacher is inside and there is a lot of heated argument going on. And you are waiting outside for because you want leave next day. CL, casual leave, you want that the next day. When you realize the principal's temper is high, you make sense of that current experience. Don't go inside that moment. You go there after 1 hour and ask for your casual leave. So that also is making sense of current experience. Am I right?
Yes, madam.
These things come from experience, no? Yeah. Next one. Next slide, please. Learning new knowledge. There are 3 reactions to new information. First is accretion. You incorporate new information to your existing schema without making changes to existing. पहले जो था उसमें additional information आ गई, that is the accretion. Second is tuning. New knowledge आया तो original जो ideas brain में थे उसमें हम modification लाए, we make changes. So that is tuning. And third one, restructuring. Old schema and new schema, new information do not match. They are inconsistent. Therefore, you don't modify old schema, but create a completely new schema. So either when you take new knowledge, it is similar to old knowledge, so you mix them together. That is accretion. Your new experience is consistent to old schema, but some modification requires. Therefore, you tune it. And the third one is new knowledge and old knowledge. They are inconsistent. They don't match. So you develop a completely new schema. So that is restructuring. This is how you learn new knowledge. Next, please. What are the benefits of schema? Okay, there are 2 major benefits. One is better retention of information and better ability to access information in authentic situations. Now, why do we learn about these schemas and how schemas are revised and how new knowledge is put into old knowledge? Why do you need this kind of information? Because we feel that students will create their own knowledge. So we need to understand how knowledge is created in their brain. And accordingly, we have to give them activities. And therefore, it is necessary to know what is schema, how schemas are developed, and how new knowledge is put into the brain to develop a new schema. Because here we assume that students create their own knowledge. They will learn on their own with our help, with we being as their facilitator. Okay, next please. Schema theory in education. Students construct and apply appropriate schema. Their brain has some concept, some schema, some structure of knowledge, which they use to solve practical problems in various domains. They become expert problem solvers in school courses. And what kind of instructional strategies we use? We use such instructional strategies which reduce too much of load into the brain of children. Irrelevant tasks are removed. So we don't put extra load on the children's cognition. And at the same time, we increase relevant cognitive load. So that is the application of schema theory in education. Next, please. How do we identify student schema? We observe what they are doing, how they are learning, how they are responding to the activities they are given. We ask for explanation. Why did you do this? Can you explain how did you solve this problem? Ask them to make predictions. Give them a project on how to predict rainfall, and then give them some data and let them make predictions. Ask to teach another student. Make small groups where they help each other to learn, they teach each other. You can make small groups and they can help others learn. So that this is how we identify students' schema. Next, please. We had about 10, 12 slides only on schema. So let us see classroom implications of schema. Prior knowledge influences what and how a student learns. I have a colleague, and he sometimes much younger to me. He sometimes comes to me for some help, some difficulty he has. He takes my help. And one day he couldn't come in the department. You know, it was not possible for some reason. So he called me up telephonically in the evening. So I told him that you read. When he started reading, I realized that what he read didn't make sense. So I started changing his sentences. He said, no, this is what you are saying is exactly what is written in the book. Then I realized his childhood was quite disadvantaged, and therefore his reading was very poor. What he read did not match with what he said. He was reading, eyes said something else, mouth said something else. So then, if your reading is not very strong, if your reading is poor, naturally what you write in the exam also would be poor. So he had to then focus on his reading skills, because his prior knowledge of reading skills was poor, and that influenced how he learned. This is an example of how prior knowledge influences what we learn and how we learn. Mic is making a noise. Please switch off your mic. Please switch off your mic.
Ramtu Gohan, please switch off.
इसका mic on है. Please switch it off.
Ramtu Gohan. Please, Ramtu Gohen, will you please mute your mic, please?
Dr. Deshmukh,
जी मैम.
दिसत नाही मला PPT.
माईक ऑफ झाल्यानंतर मी चालू करतो PPT मॅडम.
आणि पिन पण होत नाही. हा आता बघते थांब. Second one, what you remember depends on what was understood initially. So, you forget information, old information, unless that is integrated into your existing schema. The schemas of students are different from each other and also from the teacher. All of us are different individuals. Our understanding is different. Our cultural contexts are different, and therefore our schemas are also different. Both understanding and memory are driven by meaning, and learning should occur in the context in which it will be used. So these are the classroom implications of schema. Next, please.
Organizer can stop it. Organizer can stop it.
There are two people whose run to behind the mic is on. Kaushik Das, mic is on. I request both of you to switch off your mics. Thank you.
I think now it's okay.
Shall we go to the next slide? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we will looking at the theoretical part. Now we will look at the practical part, which are the different pedagogies within the umbrella term of constructivism. Next slide, please. The first one was concept mapping. Somebody has already written a remark earlier that concept mapping comes here. That is absolutely true. That time I did make a remark, but now I am saying that that example was correct. Piaget believed that learning occurs through active construction of meaning rather than receiving it passively. When I speak and you listen silently, then that is passive. You are passive, I am active. But when the other way around takes place, you are active and I am only there to help you, then that learning is more effective. Students or learners have to be more active so that learning is effective. This is Piaget's belief. He states that when we as learners encounter an experience or situation which conflicts with our current way of thinking, a state of imbalance is created. We must alter our thinking so that equilibrium or balance is restored. To do this, we must associate it with what we already know. So we have to link old knowledge with new knowledge. The developing child must build cognitive structures through the use of mental maps and concept maps. Next, please. What is a concept map? Concept maps help us begin with information we are familiar with and branch out to old new ideas. If you look at the middle one, it's a rectangle in which topic is written, around which there are ovals, 5 ovals, in which major detail, minor detail, major detail, minor detail are written. I'll give you one example which all of us will understand very well here. The topic which is at the center is our research topic. All of us have either done PhD or we are doing it currently, right? So our research topic, suppose my topic is on inquiry training model. So topic is inquiry training model. I can prepare a concept map for my chapter 2 review of related literature. How do I make? At the center is inquiry training model. On the left hand side, first oval, where major detail is written, I will write about the variables, the dependent variables that have been taken in all prior researches where inquiry training model has been studied. So dependent variables, I will make a list of all dependent variables. I will write academic achievement. I will write self-confidence. I will write critical thinking skills. I will write attitude towards the subject. I may also write attitude towards the teacher. So these are major ones. Now the one below, major detail on the left hand side, I will write all the independent variables or context variables or control variables taken. So in one study, inquiry training model was compared with concept attainment model. So major detail was inquiry training model with concept attainment model. In another study, inquiry training model was compared with traditional method of teaching. So these variables I will list out, and in the minor detail, I will write that inquiry training model, the theoretical part is different for concept attainment model. So theoretically, these two models cannot be equated. That I will write in the minor detail. Then नीचे का जो है oval, there I will write the control variables. In some study, pre-test scores are controlled. In some studies, IQ of students is controlled. In some studies, SES is controlled. And in some studies, no control variable is made. So when there is no control variable and you find that the study's analysis is not done effectively, you can put that under minor detail. Then the next one is my major detail. You can write the samples, the size of the sample and the type of sample, whether it is done for primary children, secondary children, college students, junior college students, as well as you write the sample size. And last one, you can write, fifth one, about the tools used in the prior studies. You can have one more oval where you write techniques of data analysis, and you can have, that will be sixth one, and the seventh one could also be the findings of prior studies. So you can nicely prepare a concept map of your entire review of related literature at the end of chapter 2. So this kind of concept map will make it very clear about what has been studied in the past, how you can use that to develop your study, and what are the gaps in existing knowledge. So you can use it, of course, for teaching, but you can also use it in research chapter 2. So I'm just trying to apply this concept map, how you can use it in chapter 2 of your PhD or your MPhil or whatever you are doing. Some of you might be guiding also, some of you might be doing PhD, some may have completed, and you may become a guide tomorrow. So this kind of concept mapping can be used in research very well. Next, please. The next pedagogy is cooperative learning. Many of us don't know. So I'll just talk about the syntax and go ahead. What are the steps? You tell the students what are your instructional objectives, academic and social. Sometimes the objective is to ensure that there is a sense of cooperation in the class and a sense of competition is reduced. So that could be a social instructional objective. Then determine group size. You want a group of 3 or 4, you want a group of 5 or 6, and assign students. There are several ways of assigning students. Determine how you will want to assign students to groups. Arrange the room. Cooperative learning cannot be done in a traditional classroom setup. Plan instructional materials to promote interdependence. Whose interdependence? Students are dependent on each other. Assign group roles. Someone may be group leader. Someone may be observing and writing down. Someone may be to get material from the internet, from the books, and so on. So different roles are assigned to groups, to students. Give them tasks. What tasks have they do they have to do? Do they have to do a project? Do they have to solve a worksheet? What do they have to do? Explain what are the criteria for success. Structure positive interdependence and accountability. Yes, you have to perform contract, learning contract. You have to do this learning today. So that's accountability. Specify desired behaviors. Don't compete. Don't put your friends down. Help each other. Okay. And the others are things that you have to keep in mind is how you will implement, how you will monitor students' behavior. You have to intervene if required, if students are fighting, there are conflicts. Assist with needs. Some student is weak and he needs more support from you. So provide that. Praise. If some group is good in work, praise them. Provide closure at the end, summarize whatever has been learned and close the chapter. Evaluate students' learning and reflect on what happened. Next, please. Next is metacognitive learning. Next, please. What are the different metacognitive strategies? Identify your own learning style and needs. Similarly, help students to identify their learning styles and their needs. Plan for a task. Collect material that is reading material or exercise material or worksheets that is required. Arrange a space and schedule for study. Students may make mistakes while they are learning. So monitor that and help them out to remove mistakes. Evaluate the success of the task the students have undertaken and evaluate the success of learning strategy and adjusting. Next, please. Due to lack of time, I'm not explaining full KWL strategy, but if you want more knowledge, you read up on KWL strategy. It will give you a proper procedure of how to use metacognitive strategies for teaching. What else is included under metacognitive strategy? No, please. You activate your no. Activate prior knowledge of students. You have to use explicit strategy instruction. Tell them this is how you will be learning. You have to model learn strategy. Show them how to learn. Memorization can be a strategy. Guided practice. You give them some practice work, but you guide them how to do it. The guided practice is also accompanied by independent practice. First, give them work and you guide them. After that, you withdraw and give them independent work. And structured reflection. You give them several questions. They will answer those questions. And what are those questions? What did I learn today? How well did I learn? What process did I follow to learn it? What aspect I did not learn? Why I did not learn? What process I used in those concepts which I did not learn? Could I use any other technique to learn this particular part? So such questions could be given to students. That is known as structured reflection. And students, in fact, can maintain a journal for such structured reflection. And my suggestion is you collect these journals from students where they have written their reflection. Side by side, you also prepare a journal in which you write observations, how the students are learning, what discussions are taking place, which strategy was useful in learning, which was not useful in learning, which strategy was more useful for intelligent students, which strategies were more useful for slow learners or low achievers. And then your journal plus students' journal, put them together and do a qualitative study. It would be a wonderful thing. We send it, write a paper on it and send it for publication. This will be something very unique you can do. Next, please. The next is brain-based learning. Next, please. What is it? It is derived from the theory of cognitive neuroscience, how brain functions. It's a learning model which depends on the structure and function of the brain. Again, this is based on Piaget's theory of cognitive learning. According to him, mental or cognitive processes include, as we said earlier, schema, assimilation and accommodation. You have one schema. When new information goes there, it is assimilated and accommodated with the schema. So the old schema is slightly modified. And organization and the equilibrium. You have some knowledge, new knowledge comes to you, which is completely different, in conflict with the old knowledge. So you have to then prepare a new schema so that you bring equilibrium in your brain. So that is this point. 3 strategies for teachers. Create a classroom atmosphere which is capable of stimulating the students' ability to think. To bring students in an environment which is very pleasant. Create an atmosphere of active and meaningful learning for students. If you are teaching students from the slum, and if you give them example of how an aeroplane flies, it is not going to be meaningful to those students. Your example in a municipal school has to be relevant to their lives. Similarly, if you are teaching in a very high-profile ICSE schools, if you give examples of slum children, they may not be able to relate it. So you give example where in the class where the subject matter relates to the students' lives, their culture, and their environment. Next, please. The steps or syntax is like this. Pre-exposure. You have to encourage students to pay attention to brain nutrition and encourage children to drink enough water. So you have to pay attention to what, even in the class, if they eat, our traditional culture doesn't allow. But unless their lower order needs are satisfied, they will not be able to study. So there is no, there is nothing wrong if you give some time for students. If they feel hungry, they can you give them 5 minutes off from learning, let them finish their eating. Stretching the muscles by doing the right, especially if the class is of 2 periods together, in between for 5 minutes, give them some stretching exercise on the left side, on the right side, their neck and the shoulder. And you have to deliver the learning objectives. This is pre-exposure. Next comes preparation. Present issues or facts, such as symptoms in everyday life associated with the material being studied. Encourage students to think about the connection between issues or facts to be learned with the subject matter before. Then in initiation and acquisitions, distribute worksheets. You have to prepare worksheets. Prepare students to conduct activities such as observation inside and outside the class. Elaborate. Assist students in group discussions and class discussions. This is very important. Next, please. Incubation and inserting a memory. Soft classical music, if it is played while teaching some subjects, it is very easy. Students, along with that classical music, soft music, very soft, to stretch the muscles so that students relax, their body is relaxed, their muscles are relaxed, and their brain is also relaxed. It becomes stress-free. So that is very necessary. And students write down about what they have learned. Self-reflection. That can be written in a journal. Verification and checking conviction. Ask the students about what they have learned today. Let them say it loudly. Celebration and integration. Give awards to the students who are active either as individuals or groups. Now, recently, Tata Institute of Social Sciences and my department, during pandemic, in April and May, we conducted some online sessions where we invited people from all over India. They took sessions. Sometimes the topics were from the syllabus, sometimes it was not, but relevant to MEd, B.Ed and MEd both. And out of 10, if any participant has attended 7 sessions, we gave them an online special badge. This was an award to motivate them. Because this kind of attendance is not linked with marks, they may not attend. So we give them a special badge, online badge, to show that we are motivating you for your attendance. Ask students to give yells as to express their excitement. Yay! That kind of a thing. So that also is, but ensure that other classes are not disturbed. You can do it on the ground if you want. Next, please, the last slide. Authentic assessment. Next. Authentic assessment is a measurement of intellectual accomplishments which are worthwhile, significant, and meaningful. It is not MCQ where you learn something. Unfortunately, this year, all the final exams are going to be done by MCQ. But first of all, MCQs don't measure all the teaching objectives, and they may not be very much worthwhile and significant also. But this year's situation is rather completely different. Na bhuto na bhavishyati. So we are doing it, but that is not a good way of assessment. Authentic assessment tends to focus on the context of the task, enabling students to show their competency in a more authentic setting. And the techniques or strategies that we use are: teachers evaluate individual students' contribution to discussion. पहले मैंने 2-3 स्लाइड पहले बोला था individual or group discussion. So let them discuss. You observe that, and your observation is a technique of evaluating them. Group evaluation of discussion, self-assessment of contribution to discuss. Prepare a short questionnaire and give it to students and let them say how they evaluate their own contribution to the discussion. Some are silent. Once you give this kind of a self-evaluation sheet to them, they will realize, if I stay quietly in the class when discussion is going on, I will lose marks. Rubrics, portfolios where you show your work that you have done. Writing journals, I gave you example of how to write journals. Demonstrations and performances, and group or individual projects. I think I finished. It's 5:30. I have to stop in any case. Next slide, please.